What if the mistake that sends most people to hell was being made inside the church by those who think they're serving God? In today's story, meet Karen Mitchell, a pastor's wife who died for 9 minutes and returned with a revelation from Jesus that will shake everything you think about ministry. Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment on which city you're watching from. This message needs to reach lives. My name is Karen Mitchell. I am 49 years old and I've been a pastor's wife for 27 years. I live in Birmingham, Alabama, where my husband, Pastor Michael, leads River of Fire Church, a congregation known for its revival, packed conferences, and nearly 2,000 active members. I was what they call here First Lady, the First Lady of the church, always elegant, always smiling, always ready to pose for photos with the women of the ministry. But on January 4th, 2025 at 10:47 a.m., during emergency surgery after a collapsed intestine, my heart stopped for 9 minutes. During this time, my soul was ripped from my body and taken to a place that it was neither heaven nor hell, but a courtroom so real that time itself seemed to have stopped. There was no Jesus with a lamb on his lap. There was fire in the eyes of the King of Kings, and when he spoke my name, Karen, it felt like all the layers of my soul were ripped away in a second. "You never served me," he said. "You served the system you built to control." I protested. I cried out with tears, but I was my husband's intercessor. I protected him, kept his schedule, and watched over the altar. But then he opened a book, not the Bible, but the record of my life, and a giant screen appeared, showing a list of names. 127 names. 127 people driven away from the church because of me. 32 families broken up. 11 young people who committed suicide, 4 mercy ministries sabotaged, and the most devastating, you have prevented 2,046 souls from knowing me. I started shaking. I thought, but how? I was just trying to organize, protect the altar. And that's when Jesus showed me the lie that destroys thousands of churches in the world. You thought you were protecting, but you were controlling. And then he revealed, that's the mistake that has sent thousands to hell. The mistake of pastors' wives who became queens behind the scenes, but were never servants at the altar. Do you want to know what I saw next? Do you really want to? Because what I'm about to tell you could destroy your church image or save your soul. The first thing Jesus showed me was the platform of our church. From a spiritual point of view, the physical appearance vanished. The gleaming altar, the modern lights, the screens, everything vanished like smoke. In place of the church, I saw a dark room with 3 thrones, and one of them was mine. I was confused. My throne was golden, with shining stones, but Jesus's was dim, abandoned, and the 3rd throne was occupied by something that chilled me to the bone. A demonic, feminine-looking being with eyes like wells of poison. She had my clothes, my posture, even my smile. But it was her, not I, who commanded the cult. "This is the spirit of manipulation you have fed for 27 years, Jesus said. He ruled by your side, while you claimed to be serving me. I saw quick dinners, like flashes, the woman who arrived in a tight dress, and I discreetly instructed the receptionist to place her at the back of the church. The young man with tattoos who wanted to be part of the media team, and I smiled, but quickly advised the leader to wait a little longer with him. The divorced sister I counseled with verses out of context not to lead any ministry. Every gesture, every judgmental look, every word spoken with care were decisions made not by the Bible, but by my fear of losing control. You thought you were filtering to protect the altar, but you were protecting your personal domain. And then I saw the meetings I organized with the leaders' wives. I said it was to align the spirit of leadership, but what we did there was spiritual espionage. We talked about who was cold, who was strange, who was dishonorable, but Jesus showed me that every word that came out of my mouth created demonic bonds of division and control, literally. You have turned the house of prayer into a palace of control and taken my throne. It was at that moment that I saw something that almost made my spirit implode. The devil sitting next to me in church, Sunday after Sunday, dressed like me, smiling like me. And Jesus said to me, he fed on his zeal, because his zeal was never for me. It was for his name, his reputation, his influence. I felt a bitter taste in my soul's mouth, a terror that cannot be explained in words. And then Jesus said something that changed my eternity. Thousands are in hell today because you taught that service is control, that love is hierarchy, that leadership is manipulation. You are a Jezebel disguised as an intercessor. And in that moment, I saw a crowd in hell pointing at me, screaming my name. Karen! It was her. She pushed me away. She judged me. She made me give up. It was she who blocked my chance to know grace. And Jesus said, these souls were led astray by an error that continues to be repeated every Sunday, inside the church, by the woman sitting to the left of the pulpit. Do you want to know how this error starts? This was the first scene that Jesus made me relive. One Sunday, 2012, right after church, a young woman named Emily, with red eyes from crying, came running to me. First Lady Karen, please, I need to speak to the pastor. It's urgent. I smiled, hugged her with that sweet tone as always, and said, honey, the pastor is exhausted. He needs rest to minister tonight. Tell me what's going on. Maybe I can help you. At the time, it seemed like wisdom, pastoral care, discernment. But in that eternal court, Jesus showed me what two never wanted to see. Emily didn't need me. She needed a shepherd. She was raped by a youth leader. She came to you. You silenced her to protect the ministry. That was like a thunderclap inside my spirit. I remembered exactly how I treated her. Let's pray, honey. Don't spread this around. God knows all things. We don't want gossip in the church. Jesus showed the effect in sequence. Emily was never heard. She left the church in silence. He tried to kill himself twice. Today he lives far from faith, with irreversible trauma. The abuser? He continued in the ministry for 3 more years because no one ever told the pastor. You were the wall between the flock and the shepherd. You blocked, filtered, selected, and each block cost a soul. And then Jesus showed hundreds of other similar situations. Couples in marital crisis who were counseled by me without ever seeing the pastor. Young people with identity crises who I said were just in spiritual rebellion. Families in need that I ignored because I didn't want to encourage dependency. You decided who was priority and who was problem. You have molded the church in your image, not in mine. I saw shepherds crying alone because their sheep were bleeding and they didn't even know it. I saw spiritual children being aborted before birth because I was the mandatory filter. And Jesus spoke with a pain that made the entire universe tremble. You stole your husband's pastoral role. He became a preacher, but he was never a pastor. And then I saw what this error has caused in other churches all over the world. Pastors' wives turning living ministries into dead religious systems. Women of prayer becoming centers of spiritual manipulation. Counselors becoming executioners under a cloak of mercy. And it all starts with one sentence. The pastor is busy. Talk to me. That's the mistake. The mistake that sent thousands to hell. And Jesus continued, the worst deception is when control looks like zeal. That's where Satan builds his thrones, inside the church. Want to know what I saw after that? Jesus then took me to see something he called the architecture of spiritual control. It was like a black cathedral, built inside the church. And in the center, a gigantic web. Every strand gleamed with dark, sickly hues, like tentacles of pride, vanity, and manipulation. At the center of the web, you. That's the network you've built, Karen. You're not only to blame for those you directly alienated, but also for everyone who was contaminated by your example. Jesus pointed to the threads and names began to appear. Janet, leader of the women's group, who learned from me to exclude those who did not dress in a dignified manner. Lynette, responsible for visitors, who I taught to smile, but to ignore anyone who didn't seem like a potentially strong member. Marcia, the deacon's wife, who was making secret reports to me about suspicious behavior in the church. Every woman, every link, every group, it was an extension of my influence. You created a system parallel to the kingdom, a church within the church, a kingdom of appearances where mercy was exchanged for personal preferences. The scene changed. I saw my leadership team, the chosen ones, as I called them, women faithful to me, not to God. The criterion, it wasn't holiness, it was personal loyalty. Those who defended me gained prominence. Those who questioned me were subtly erased. You rewarded idolatry with positions and punished freedom with isolation. We, a young girl named Daisy, who began to grow in the ministry of intercession. She was intense, true, and bold, but he made the mistake of not consulting me to lead a vigil. The next day, I called her to talk. I told her she needed to take better care of the home, that maybe she was moving too fast. She left the ministry weeks later. Jesus showed me. Daisy was my chosen one to be a prophet in that generation. But you silenced her because she threatened your invisible throne. You sabotaged dozens of ministries you didn't control. You preferred a smaller church under your control to a larger kingdom where you were just a servant. The spiritual web was expanding before me. Every person who has learned to exclude, every leader who has learned to judge, each volunteer imitated my selectivity as if it were discernment. You have created disciples of your own spirit, a legacy of control, disguised as zeal. And then Jesus said something that broke my soul into pieces. When you died, the system you built would continue for generations because your poison was taught as wisdom. And that's when I understood. This error doesn't stop when the woman dies. It multiplies. It spreads. It becomes culture. It becomes the norm. It becomes false gospel. And Jesus completed, what you call order, I call oppression. What you call prudence, I call unbelief. What you call strategy, I call demonic control. It was then that he showed me the face of someone you know, someone you've seen, someone who might be you. Jesus then pointed to a young woman with firm eyes, an elegant posture, and a Bible always under her arm. She was smiling, sitting in the front row of the church. Do you know her? Jesus asked. No, but it looks familiar, I replied. She learned from you. Her name was Rachel Turner, 28 years old, recently married to a young assistant pastor at our church. Rachel was sweet, helpful, always ready to help with whatever was needed. Jesus showed how she silently observed me in services, at events, in leadership meetings. She mentally noted every sentence I said. The pastor needs to rest. Talk to me first. This sister is not mature enough for this ministry. Let's maintain order. Better not release these kinds of people into leadership now. Rachel didn't question it. She absorbed. And then I saw a scene from the future, a cult 5 years ahead. Rachel, now dressed even more sophisticatedly, was leading the women's ministry. Her husband, promoted to senior pastor. And what about her? She was already called the shepherd's covering. Karen Mitchell taught me everything I know, she said proudly. But what she did wasn't discipleship. It was domination. She decided alone who would have access to her husband, canceled meetings that didn't pass your filter, created private female leadership groups, where the final word was always hers. Jesus turned to me and said in a voice like a hammer, "This is the legacy of your mistake. You not only destroyed, you multiplied destroyers. You not only fell, you taught how to fall with the appearance of wisdom." Rachel became a spiritual mirror of me, and each of her actions created new threads in the web. Rejected youth, oppressed women, men prevented from leading, ministries aborted before birth. I saw one young evangelist named Mark who tried to start an urban evangelism project. Rachel stopped him with the following sentence, "The pastor is praying to know if it is God's will. Wait." But Jesus revealed, the pastor never knew about the project. Rachel had intercepted everything, with the same subtlety she learned from me. Mark left the church, frustrated. Today he lives in Los Angeles, saying that church is a power game, not a place of God. And Jesus whispered in pain, "This is your fruit." But what devastated me most was seeing whom Rachel was discipling. 3 women sitting around her, young, full of passion, but each one receiving the same doctrine disguised as wisdom. Protect the altar. The pastor does not need to know everything. Control is care. It was the cycle of error repeating itself. And Jesus said, "This is the error that lives on in many churches right now. Pastors' wives are not raising servants. They are raising control clones. And every time a soul is wounded by them, the echo comes back to the one who taught it." At that moment, I shouted, "But Lord, I didn't know it was so serious. I thought I was serving." And then Jesus stopped. He looked at me with eyes full of fire and said, "Ignorance is no excuse in the kingdom. Because my spirit warned you. You just didn't want to listen. You want to know what he showed me after that. Because the next vision, it wasn't about the future. It was about hell." Jesus said to me, "Now I'm going to show you where those who keep making the same mistake go." After being warned, suddenly the ground beneath my feet opened up. I was sucked into a darkness that wasn't just the absence of light. It was the living presence of torment. But what shocked me, it wasn't a hell with screams, fire, or monsters. It was a church. Yes, a huge, golden, fragrant temple, with red carpets and luxurious floral arrangements. At the pulpit, a pastor preached eloquently. People said, "Amen," raised their hands, and wept. But the Holy Spirit was not there. And then I saw they well-dressed women with impeccable hair sat in the front rows. They carried their Bibles. They smiled. But the eyes were dead. Jesus said, "These are the wives who rejected me in the name of ministry." Each of them held a black diary, and in each diary there was a word engraved in fire: control. They planned services, meetings, events, but they never planned to hear from me. Jesus showed me what happened to them every week in eternity. They were forced to witness the eternal consequences of the decisions they made. A woman who blocked a missionary out of jealousy saw lost souls wandering in darkness. Another one who disbanded the deliverance ministry because he didn't like the leader. He saw families trapped in curses for generations. One who separated couples with manipulative advice heard the spiritual screams of destroyed children. These women's hell is not fire. It is eternal consciousness. It is knowing that, while they preached holiness, they were serving the spirit of Jezebel with perfume and a cloak of piety. And then I saw a mirror. In the reflection, there it was, you, dressed in white, hairstyled, Bible in hand, but in the eyes, the same death. Jesus said, "This would be your eternity if you died without regret, not by adultery, not by murder, not by heresy, but by control. Because you reigned where you were supposed to serve. You protected your reputation instead of protecting my sheep." At that moment, I started listening voices from the past. She wouldn't let me talk to the pastor. I was judged by her, not by God. My ministry died because she blocked me. That woman destroyed my faith. There were hundreds, thousands, voices echoing like arrows in my spirit. Karen kept me from knowing grace. Karen kicked me out gracefully. Karen killed me with smiles. I saw faces, eyes, tears, and Jesus said, "Hell is paved with women who knew everything, except how to love like I loved." Because controlling is easy, serving requires dying. And then he pulled me up, with a force that seemed to tear dimensions apart. It's not the end for you yet, but now you know the price. You want to know what happened when I got back, and what Jesus told me to do with the months I still have left. Suddenly, I felt as if I were being swallowed by a hurricane of light. My body was being pulled violently. Machine sounds, muffled screams, monitors, the sterile smell of the hospital. Karen, you're back. Oh my God, she's back. It was my husband, Pastor Michael, crying over me. I was left 9 minutes dead, 9 minutes without a heartbeat, 9 minutes without breathing. But what I experienced was an eternity. When I opened my eyes, the words that came out of my mouth were not of gratitude. They were terrifying. "Michael, I destroyed the church. I destroyed you. I was the Jezebel of the altar." He thought it was delirium. The doctors thought so too. But in the hours that followed, I recounted details that no one ever told me. Situations from years ago, people he didn't even remember, but whom Jesus showed me with surgical precision. Did you know that Emily tried to commit suicide after being ignored by me? Did you know that young Mark left the church because I blocked his project without telling you? Did you know that Rachel is repeating everything I did and creating a church that looks like it has no presence? My husband turned white. He cried like a baby, and then I told about the time I had left. Jesus had been clear. You have 12 months, 1 year to undo what you did, to expose the wrong, to free others, and he gave me a mission. You will shout to the pastors' wives. It will tear the veil of pride. He will descend from the golden throne. It will break the scepter of control, and she will cry out, "I was Jezebel and I didn't know it." I started that very day. I recorded a video still in my hospital gown. No makeup, no preparation. I looked at the camera and said, "I'm Karen Mitchell. I died for 9 minutes, and I discovered that hell is full of pastors' wives like me. And if you're watching this right now, Jesus is giving you the same chance he gave me. I told you everything, name by name, case by case. I deleted all the secret groups I kept. I handed my planner to my husband with a single sentence. From today on, no one needs to go through me to get to you." I returned to the church, with stitches still in my body, and called out to each person I had turned away. I asked for forgiveness in public, not to cause scandal, but to obey. If my fall was public, my repentance will be too. That Sunday's service did not end. People started to kneel. Leaders cried out loud. Men who never got emotional bowed down. And for the first time in years, the presence of God returned. Jesus said to me, "That's what true repentance does. It drives out Jezebel and brings my spirit back." But that was just the beginning. The mission he gave me was greater and more urgent. Jesus was clear with me. You will expose error where it hides most, within the churches. The Monday after I returned, still swollen from surgery, I started writing names. Pastors, wives, female leaders, first ladies of ministry, women who, like me, were seen as servants, but who, spiritually, were enthroned. Some friends, others, former silent enemies who challenged me, and I nullified them with spirituality. You won't accuse them. You'll wake up. You will not judge. You will reveal. But if you don't obey, their blood will be on your hands, said the Lord. I started sending messages. I called 47 women. I created a group with the name Jesus gave me, Dethroning Jezebel. On the first day, 7 left the group. They called me a heretic, emotional, dramatic. They said, "You almost died and now you want to redeem yourself by burning what you built. Karen, be careful not to scandalize your husband's name. That's all in your head. God doesn't accuse you like that." But 13 remained, and in the second virtual meeting, broke. One of them, Cynthia, a pastor's wife for 40 years, cried saying, "I always thought my coldness was wisdom, but it was pure pride. I never let anyone get close to my husband. I always filtered everything. I did what you did. I was you, Karen." Other, Melissa, revealed, "The last young woman who wanted pastoral counseling was referred to me. She was struggling with depression and sexual identity. I prayed, but with disdain. Today I found out she committed suicide 2 months ago. She never reached the pastor. Each meeting was like a spiritual exorcism service. The demon of control with a veneer of piety manifested itself in every confession. Women confessing that they chose which sisters could sing in the choir based on their appearance. Others saying that they barred families because they were poor to maintain the aesthetics of the cult. Intercession leaders who only prayed for those they trusted. And Jesus showed me something that made me tremble. These women are just a sample. There are thousands right now, sitting in the front rows, with their long skirts and their locked hearts, with their anointed smiles and their dominated souls, with their titles of servants, but acting like queens of control. They are the invisible cancer of the church, and you have 12 months to find them, confront them, and call them back. It was then that Jesus gave me the final warning. If you remain silent, I will lift up stones, but their blood will be upon you. And so, it began to dethronement operation. Videos, cards, crying, confrontations, persecutions. Some hated me, others regretted it, but they were all warned. That's the mistake that continues, because no one has the courage to say that he has a pretty face, a sweet voice, and a modest dress. Jesus gave me specific words to preach, ignored texts, forgotten characters, stories of as the Bible never authorized women to reign at the altar, only to serve on the floor. And so, hundreds began to awaken, leaders began to confess publicly, wives began to release their husbands, pastors' children began to say, "For the first time, I see my mother serving, not reigning." But then, Jesus warned me, the most dangerous has not yet been confronted. She is famous, respected, and she is about to die, thinking she will be welcomed with applause. But hell already has a throne named after her. You want to know who was she? It was an April night, 3 months after my return from the beyond. I was praying in my room, alone, when Jesus said to me in a sharp voice, "You need to alert Marilyn Stone." Now, I was in shock. Marilyn Stone was a legend in U.S. evangelical circles, wife of Bishop Ronald Stone, leader of one of the largest megachurches in Houston, Texas, author of 5 books, followed by millions, guest of honor at conferences, summits, congresses. They called her Queen of Wisdom, Oracle of Intercession, Mother of the Nation. But Jesus said with pain, "She is Jezebel crowned, and you will die in 11 days, believing you are coming into my arms, but you will be cast into darkness." I tried to resist. "Lord, she will never listen to me. She is too powerful, unreachable." But the Spirit was firm. "It is not up to you to be heard. It is up to you to obey." I sent messages, emails, cards. No one answered. So, in an act of spiritual desperation, I did something I never thought I would do. I went to her church, without an invitation, without an appointment, just obeying. It was a Friday afternoon. There was a women's service, and there she was, Marilyn Stone, impeccable white dress, pearl earrings, the gold-covered Bible. The audience was ecstatic, crying, applauding, idolizing her. I sat in the back. My hands were shaking, my stomach was aching, but my soul was burning. In the end, I managed to get closer. "First Lady Stone, forgive me. I need to speak to you. It's urgent. Jesus sent me." She smiled with her lips, but her eyes, cold, hard, like stone. "You're the one who died, aren't you? The one who says pastors' wives go to hell." "Yes," I whispered. She smiled again. "Be careful, sister. Heresy is also the path to hell. Don't judge what you don't understand." "Marilyn," my voice trembled, "you have 11 days. Jesus showed me. You will die with public honor, but with heavenly condemnation." She laughed, literally laughed. "Do you really think God would reject me? Do you know how many lives I have reached? Do you know how much we donated to the project? Do you know how many churches we have planted? And how many did you control?" I asked. "How many have you silenced? How many have you alienated with your poisonous diplomacy? How many died without access to the altar because you were the barrier? How many young women were ministerially aborted because they didn't follow your pattern? How many pastors' wives have modeled themselves after you to become walking thrones?" For a second, her smile disappeared. His eyes twitched, but he soon recovered. "You're confused. Karen, go home. Go pray. This is trauma from what you've experienced." And he turned his back. That night, I cried like a child. 11 days later, Marilyn Stone died in her sleep. There was a national tribute. Pastors from around the world posted tributes. "Warrior of faith, lioness of the altar, servant of God." But Jesus told me something I will never forget. She got to heaven and was rejected. "You never knew me. You only knew the feeling of being worshipped in my name." She served the ministry, not the kingdom, and she dragged thousands with her. You want to know, how does this story end? What Jesus told me to do with the remaining time. Today, while I'm recording this video, there are exactly 33 days to complete the deadline that Jesus gave me. 12 months. 12 months to expose the error. 12 months to undo the web. 12 months to warn women like me before they die full of honor, but condemned in eternity. Maybe you think I'm radical. Maybe you're watching this and saying, "That's an exaggeration. God is love. God sees the heart." I'm just helping my husband. I'm not controlling. I just maintain order. I used to say that too. Exactly that. But as he said these sentences, souls were being driven away. Ministries were being sabotaged. And the worst, Jesus was being kicked out of the church, gently by the woman he claimed to be helping. But if you're still breathing, you can change. Now, right now. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.